Hi, now before I start talking about the chapters, please remember that my discussion topics don't necessarily follow a chronological order, which means I can link narrative beats and ideas more easily and dive further into them. Okay, so let's get into it. So holy crap, these last two chapters were pretty incredible. This is what I really read Tower of God for. I might be in the minority, but chapters focused on character introductions, large-scale plotting, and world building are my absolute favourites. You know, like, SAU has been clearly setting up this war saga for, like, a long time. Like, dating back to at least the Name Hunt Station arc, I think it was, where we had Man, Shenny, and Yuri exchanging bets about the future. SAU has also alluded to a Princess War arc in the blog posts, but I'm not really sure when that was actually approaching. You know, I love these types of sagas, so probably expect me to grow increasingly more hype with every chapter, because it's just reminding me of reading Marineford in One Piece for the first time, and experiencing the sheer excitement of, like, prominent characters, you know, coming together and sort of the large-scale consequences of those actions. You know, there's nothing really quite like a war saga, which is probably non-coincidentally the reason I love Kingdom so much. But yeah, I'm not gonna go into the Mangrove Kingdom, you know, this is a Tower of God video. So, with that out of the way, let's dive right into the chapter content. So, the three choice system. Let's go through that. So we've got three choices handed down by Zahard to several Empire altars, run by the High Priest Stuar Arthur, and managed by the Vice Altar Directors, who reside in these weird altar administrative accommodations that are like these block-shaped designs. Honestly, it's kind of ugly, and I don't really get what it's trying to go for, but that's how SAU designed it. But then we've also got the introduction of the administrative chairperson, Arvin Lou, whose role is not totally clear, but it sounds like the High Priest usually reports to Lo on matters of altar orders. But then we've also got the system of the rankers being awarded authoritative positions in the altars. I'm not exactly sure what the new recruit's position was, but I assume he was like an apprentice director or something. They can rise up through the ranks in that system, which I found pretty interesting as well. The system appears to be structured in a way that the administrative decisions on orders from Zahard are presented to a council of ministers before enacting down sort of a chain of command. But as we see in chapter 309, Stuar just bypasses this entirely. Like, he does not care about the formality whatsoever and just bypasses it to save ass. So, I'm not entirely sure how that usually works. Like, who are the ministers? Have we seen the ministers before? I don't think we have. So, it'd be interesting to find out who these ministers are as well. Just because I want to see the entire chain of command sort of mapped out. Because now we've got some sort of building blocks of the Zahard Empire, but I want to see that fully fleshed out. But yeah, also notice the regal naming of the communication towers. That sort of fits with not only the Christianity theme of Tower of God that just runs through it entirely, but also just Zahard's general feel, his general presence in the manual. So going back to the three choice system, they are given, the Vice Altar Directors are given reign to act upon one choice, which apparently causes the other two choices to disappear, but that's according to Line Webtoon. Now, some Korean fans last week had mentioned that it was an order in which you pick one, but the others happen regardless. So it's just a matter of picking the order in which they happen. And it kind of seems like this chapter confirmed that, because Stuart consistently notes that either way they choose, this war is going to happen. They have to attack Tharg, they have to attack the Protobodo family. So it sounds like the Korean fans were right on that. But it was really confusing last week, because I'm kind of glad that I'm doing these bi-weekly chapter discussions, because otherwise I would have been totally in the dark last week, and I probably would have said that Line Webtoons was correct, because I had no confirmation at that point, but I don't know. The translation team can be really iffy at points, and I kind of prefer even though it was illegal, the scanlation teams were a lot better, in my opinion. They understood the naming and everything in Tarot God way more than the current translation team for Line Webtoon. So I've got a theory about Zahard's orders that he gives to the scroll, or the altars. So, if you don't know whom I'm about to mention, I don't blame you, because they're only located in the blog post content and not in the main chapter content. So the 3 people I'm about to mention are the 3 lords, or the 3 crimson red eyes of Zahard. So these 3 people, named Moloch 1 PJR or PGR, Juchuan and Flux, are essentially like the second chain of command in Zahard's empire. So they operate directly under Zahard in running the tower and just the general minutiae of the government that Zahard's built. So I was thinking to myself that could it be possible that maybe the scroll, or the orders in the scroll, are actually written by the 3 lords, and the reason there is 3 different orders is because there's 3 different lords, potentially with different views, and maybe that's why Zahard's intent is funneled through their little assembly, and maybe they put his intent into words, and maybe it's sort of like this formality that runs in this chain of command. So I think this is possible because it fits the fatalistic, slightly democratic feel of Zahard's empire. But also, if you've noticed that when the scroll appeared on the altar, there was actually a crimson red 3-eye symbol directly above that. So that could be a little piece of evidence pointing towards the fact that maybe it's not directly written by Zahard himself, and actually just it goes through the 3 lords before it goes to the altars, or potentially even someone else as well, but I doubt it. Okay, so let's go through the 3 choices given by Zahard, or potentially his 3 lords. So, first is killing or destroying Thug's organization. Now, we don't know much about the secrecy of Thug, other than they're generally less secretive than most terrorist organizations in manga or manhwa, because they openly oppose the Zahard Empire, with members or slayers being a part of the general knowledge, even among regulars, as seen in like the Workshop Battle Arc or Floor 20. But Arthur notes that Thug had become a religious entity, so making it extremely difficult to completely banish those who support the cause, which makes a lot of sense, and it was kind of what I assumed from last week, that they'd be very hard to eliminate, because not only do the Zahard Empire not necessarily know every single Thug member, it's become this sort of transient organization where they follow a common goal and inspire continuously other members to join. So even if all of the Thug members die, there'll be new Thug members arriving and forming their own organization out of it. You know, they'll never eliminate them. They're like a phoenix, they just rise and rise again. And then we've got killing or destroying the Hell Train inhabitants. Now, I think this is the most logical choice, in my opinion, and probably apparently Arthur's too, considering they could destroy the Hell Train before Bam and company are able to escape. And if Zahard Empire rankers use the middle tower, they might get there even faster. But there's also a catch, and that's that they'd have to violate the rules of the tower. And it also seems that altar administrators have a superficial purpose of keeping up appearances, so they might not want to commit an unjustified act of murder in front of the general populace, because obviously the Hell Train is famous, people know that it had been eliminated by Zahard's forces, and I don't think that would sit well with most of the regulars, so I'm assuming they just don't want to cause an uprising of some sort. So they want to keep appearances, keep the formalities. Potentially that might be also why Zahard has this specific chain of command going, because he wants to keep it as a formal organization that appears to be run democratically, appears to be run in a methodical fashion that is just and swift, instead of just being a chaotic force that is bound to Zahard's will. Now, the Poe-Badeau family line is the most debatable one. For starters, Stuar says that several members of the Poe-Badeau family are among the military and even the administrative authorities. As we saw in 309, Stuar and the Vice Alta Director decided to betray the new Ranker recruit for a miscommunication error, which led to every single person below the High Priest being murdered. It's fucking crazy. You know, I think that means that even the Vice Alta Director himself would have been punished, if I'm following the chain of command correctly. I feel like this is the first time we've seen a backstabbing moment in a really long time in the story. So I was just really enjoying that scene, because it's just, you know, it's reminiscent of the earlier days of Tower of God. You know, we've gone from a very hardcore sort of betrayal, politically infused manga or manhwa to a more shonen-esque story. Now, I know it was always a shonen, but it felt like the first part of the first season and the season 2 part 1 were significantly different to the Hell Train saga. But this it felt like the old days to me, at least. But yeah, so I've also had conversations with other fans who asserted that completing this objective was near impossible due to the immortality of Gustang and the interwoven complexities of removing an entire hereditary line of the 10 great families. So they conceded that maybe Odori could capture them but not destroy them. But my counter argument, it's pretty simple, honestly. You know, if the option was there, then it has to be accomplishable. They can't just put an order there and be like, well, we know you can't complete this, but try anyway. You know, it's silly. Zahard's not stupid. He's not going to put an order out there that they can't complete. It made sense to me that if Gustang's family is there on that list, that must mean they are killable. It must mean that they can eliminate the entire hereditary line. But yeah, so I think that Zahard must innately trust that Odori and her military guard will be able to complete the order swiftly. And then, judging from the ending panels of chapter 309, Mansheni and the royal princesses have been mobilized to eliminate Fug, starting with Ginseng Ha, who has a sweet palace in the middle of nowhere. You gotta wonder how rich this dude is, because SIU comments on the blog that he's freaking rich, even though he doesn't look like it. You know, he's got his own, like, middle section of the floor. He's got this huge tower. It's just ridiculous. So yeah, to basically summarize what I think, I believe that while they attempted to save Poe-Badeau's family till last, Odori is probably going to throw that whole situation into chaos soon. So I think really what's going to happen is it's going to happen simultaneously. I think Odori might go for either the Hell Train or the Poe-Badeau family, but I think it's more likely she'll go for the Poe-Badeau family just because he's a strong enemy and probably she thinks that she needs to take out the strongest enemy first, perhaps, because she approaches situations like a weapon. You know, it doesn't sound like she's very much a person in a sense. She's very much a royal princess down to the bone. She acts like a weapon for Zahard, delivering strikes to enemies, pretty much. So I wonder if perhaps she will go for the strongest enemy first and just leave the weaklings till last because she knows she can defeat them easily. Or maybe she'll let other people defeat them. You know, get the Zahard Empire rankers to destroy the train instead of her. Okay, so moving on to the next part. So we find out that everybody is transported to a portal leading back to the Hell Train. So we have Sachi, Hockney, and Akarakta. And what I found interesting about their little interaction in 308 was that they really, really, really want to see Yu Hansung, especially Hockney, because for some reason he thinks that Yu Hansung has something to do with the painting that he's after. I'm not entirely sure why he thinks that though, because was it ever mentioned that Yu Hansung had anything to do with the painting? I don't even think he talked about it at all. Like, I'm not sure why he's after that, but I think what this opens up is a really cool narrative thread that we could be following while we follow the Princess War arc. Potentially, at least. So, I'd love to see that. Like, how we have Akaraptor, Sachi, and Hockney break off from the group, and we follow them trying to find Yu Hansung as this, like, mini narrative thread. And then maybe in the process, we also learn about Yu Hansung's relationship with Fug, relationship with Zahard, and potentially that could tie in to the Princess War arc. I think it'd be a really cool way of delivering his past, while also trying to tie up Hockney's character thread. Okay, so then we've also got Battis's child, and we find out that his child was actually a tracker, which in hindsight makes like a ton of sense. Like, I don't know why I didn't realize that before, but it makes so much sense. It's kind of sad, but I like that we've tied up that character. I wasn't a huge fan of Battis, mainly because he was just some random data entity at the end of the day. And I wasn't that invested in the Hidden Floor arc's data world, necessarily. I was more interested in some of the characters who came into it. But Battis wasn't really one of them. But, you know, it was a nice tie-up to his character arc. But I think what this provides is not necessarily... Well, I think what Battis necessarily provides to the story as a whole is not necessarily related to the Hidden Floor arc, but more to do with Yu Hansung. And we see that Yu Hansung is very nurturing, very loving in the Hidden Floor arc. And it really just obviously contrasts the Evankel Floor of Tests, where we see Yu Hansung as this manipulative, vicious entity belonging to Thug that wants to get Bam into this religious organization, you know? He's very much a villain in a sense. So it was really interesting just to see this contrast, this dichotomy. Because we also saw it with Zahard and his older version. You know, it was the same sort of situation. And I think that's one thing that I liked about the Hidden Floor arc. And it served to show a dichotomy between the past version of a character and the current version of a character. And it was usually a villainous character. So a person they got off on the right track, they went onto the revolutionary road, and then something happened. And it all came crumbling down, and now they became this person that they don't envision themselves. So, Adan, Zahard, and Yu Hansung were all... and Mazino were all really different to their counterparts. So it's going to be interesting to see why that actually happened. Like, what was the event that caused this shift in the way they thought? Now, I think I understand what Zahard's might have been, but I really don't understand what Adan's might have been. Okay, and then we have Androssi's sworn enemy. So, this is really odd. I don't really get why SAU decided to put Androssi's sworn enemy into this arc. Because if you actually think about it, what did this sworn enemy do? Literally nothing. They didn't really provide any world-building information. They just really held back Androssi and just made her like this. It was like a plot device in a sense. Except the fact that we didn't need Androssi to be held back. You know, she could have contributed. There was no reason for her to be held back. So it was really odd that all he really did was just keep her to the side. Now, I'm not sure if the reason SAU introduced him was because the Princess War arc might be coming up. But that's like the only possible explanation I can think of. That he's just setting up a couple plot threads to come into play later on. and maybe we might see this guy in his current form later down the track. That's all I can think about, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, so I always love the introduction of a new species or a new type of animal into the tower. And obviously the treasure-eating stingray is really no exception to that. Like, I really love the big, bulky design that sort of has this, like, airy feel. It feels like it can pass through walls, and I really love the continuation of the fishing theme that SIU has been going for since Season 1. I'm sure that has some role to play in the larger narrative about what the tower is. At this point, I just like the uniqueness of a fishing theme to the tower inhabitants. You know, it's not something you usually see in manga, so it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. But for now, I really like the design of the treasure-eating stingray. Now, I can't express how happy I am that Rachel's power-up was actually just a manipulative ploy by Gaston to retrieve the bracelet. Now, it makes sense why she is unable to see the stingray. I think what this really does, it makes a really organic way of weaving Rachel into the main narrative and getting her up the tower without it feeling like a really nonsensical sort of plot movement. You know, it doesn't feel like some of the other twists we've had, where Rachel just maneuvers up the tower for no reason other than SIU wants her to move up the tower. You know, this felt like a really organic way of not only letting her go up the tower, but also disadvantaging her. You know, it really makes her... It makes her identifiable. It makes her almost famous in a sense, because now all these great 10 families and Zahard will probably know about this situation. And I think that one thing that Rachel really revels in is that her anonymous nature and her sort of unthreatening persona is what has allowed her in a lot of ways to manipulate people and get her up the tower. So I think that this actually disadvantages her ability to do so, because now that she has this object, even though she doesn't realize she has this object, the fact that it's with her makes it really hard for her to move around and plot and scheme in the ways that she usually does. So it's almost like SIU is keeping her in check. You know, he wants her to proceed, but he doesn't want her to be overly powerful, overly plot-breaking in a sense. So I'm just really glad that he didn't do the same thing he's done a couple times in Season 2, and that's just let her go up the tower without much of an explanation, just because the plot demands it, you know? I'm glad this was an organic way of weaving her into the main narrative. But then you've also got this second part where SIU just keeps on delivering this sort of divine justice to Rachel. You know, there was no way that Rachel was ever getting out of the hidden floor with her Icarus form attached. You begin ugly, you stay ugly, essentially. Although Icarus was like way more creepy than Rachel ever was. You know, Rachel has the unthreatening freckles, and her complexion's a little bit lighter, and her hair's a little bit lighter. It's not that sort of mucky blonde. You know, I think like her character design is honestly a lot prettier than the Icarus form. But I think this also speaks to her obsession with superficial aspects of her life. She's never really interested in keeping and maintaining the parts of her life that really matter, and the ones that Bam seems to value a lot more than her. And that's the interpersonal relationships between characters, the bonds that they've shared. And I think that's the thing she's probably missing at this point, and probably something she's going to realize as she moves up the tower. But as we've seen, SIU punishes her for wanting these superficial features. He doesn't let her get away with it. So I think that really speaks to what SIU is trying to do with her character. You know, he's trying to contrast Rachel with Bam very, very specifically, in that she really desires these superficial aspects of life, while Bam desires the really important, the really meaningful aspects of life that people in the tower really cherish. And I think that's also mirrored a little bit in the 10 Great Families and how they used to be all these really good friends, but then they broke apart and suddenly their personalities changed. They suddenly started to act in ways that were villainous, and you can tell that Essie was really going for that battle shonen theme, but I think it's really handled quite well here, because you got Rachel as the really big contrast to these themes. So I think this finally confirms what many people have been thinking for a while now, and that's that Karaka does actually not know who Wagnan is. You know, when he grabs him as like a kidnapping, he refers to him as this kid instead of something more conspicuous. So, on one hand, I'm a little bit disappointed because, you know, I was expecting a reaction to Wagnan's unmasking. But on the other hand, this kind of opens up an entirely new line of theory crafting for their relationship. So, if they don't recognize each other, maybe they were separated at birth, which would lend credibility to that theory that they were produced in test tubes not bound to a mother. But, or maybe like the red light district is not actually some sort of seedy reference to, like, you know, the Amsterdam red light district, and it's more to do with a underworld in the Tower of God universe, where maybe something like a procedure like this would have been conducted by Zahard to produce an heir, to produce a successor to himself at some point, in secrecy, like in secrecy from the 10 Great Families. So there's a lot of stuff you can really go through here, but I think that we might find out information next week, because they are trapped together through Wagnan's teleportation needle, which is really cool. Like, I like that it's sort of manipulating fate in a way by transporting people, but I'm not sure if that's its only ability. And I think it really reminds me of Androssi's Bong Bong, except that Androssi's Bong Bong requires approval to use, to activate. Whereas Wagnan's does not seem to require that approval from Wagnan. You know, when Karaka is holding Wagnan, notice that he does not flick a switch. He does not push a button. There isn't even a panel devoted to him gripping his hand more firmly or something. You know, it just begins buzzing when Wagnan is held captive, which further reinforces to me that it's probably a living ignition weapon, similar to the Royal Princess's needles. So it's like the Black March, for instance, and how it has this girl inside of it who has a will of her own, and essentially doesn't necessarily require the approval of the owner, but more so, or it doesn't require the pressing of a button or the activation of some Shinsu ability. It just requires their intent, their emotional intent to do something, to activate it. Now onto extra notes. So Hockney continues to be this center of moral reasoning and empathy among Bam's group, even more so than Bam himself. So I really like this innocence to his character, and I kind of hope that we'll see more of this in every single arc. You know, this middle ground person who has this very grounded opinion on what's happening inside the tower. Okay, so next up, if you want to prove that Tower of God's artwork has improved immensely over its runtime, just show someone the debut of Manchini Zahard and contrast that with her appearance in the latest chapter. Like, it's actually ridiculous how much better SEO has gotten at drawing. But yeah, speaking of that, there wasn't any real standout sort of panels these last 2 weeks, except for maybe the depiction of Floor 91's middle area, where we have Jinsung Ha's residence, this really wealthy, but also kind of like a slum residence. Like, SAU makes it a point to state that he is wealthy, but he's just a weird guy, essentially. But yeah, I really love his castle, and I also love the floating ship designs with the blue crystals underneath. I feel like they've been mentioned before somewhere in the workshop battle arc and the name hunt station arc, but could someone please let me know if what the blue crystals are, what their function necessarily is, if they have a name of any sort? Because I actually don't really remember what they are. I know they allow, obviously, floating ships to be produced, but I wonder if SAU has explained it at any point. And then moving on to designs, we have the introduction of 2 new characters, which I'm always a fan of because I love new introductions. I love new designs from SAU. I think he's just a really fantastic artist. But we've got Arvin Lou and Stuar Arthur. So these 2 characters, one's very clearly inspired by a monkey design, except he's not a monkey because he's like a floating head and arms, but I like his design. His is not as important to me because he's that sort of quirky, eccentric design that I'm not a huge fan of. But I do like Stuart Arthur's design, mainly because it really fits his regal title of High Priest. You know, he's got like the white robes, he's got the contrasting hair with his facial tones. He's just got a very fitting appearance, which I really enjoy. Because, you know, I like that synchronicity of his role and his actual appearance. I don't think we've actually heard of their family names before, because I cross-checked the blogs and the wiki and I couldn't find anything referring to their family names, so I assume they're from the lesser houses, I think. You know, they're obviously not from the 10 great families, but I was curious if maybe we'd heard of their houses before at any point, but it doesn't seem like we have. But what's more intriguing actually than both of these characters is actually the unnamed messenger talking to Arvin Lou about Adobe and her royal guards. You know, like, this is probably one of my favorite SAU designs post season 1. There's a couple things I really like about it. So first we have the beak-like helmet that's attached to that's screwed on from both sides. This sort of like green and brown color palette that resides throughout the entire thing, and the red robe streaking across the back with these, I wasn't sure if it was a cross or a sword, but sort of a weapon symbol on the back. But then we've also got the pouch in front, because I think what this character is essentially like a messenger bird. I think that's what it's supposed to represent, the messenger birds of Zahard Empire. So I really like these types of designs because it shows a bottom level structure to the Empire of Zahard. It shows like the soldier workers, the uniforms of base people in the society. I think that's what I like, because it builds up a sense of chain of command. It builds up an organization. You know, if you get the bottom level people first and you build up and you build up and you see these different layers to the organization. And I think that's what I've been really liking about these couple chapters, is that we're really building up Zahard's empire in a very sort of structured way. You know, you've got the ministers, you've got the high priest, you've got the vice altar directors, who might be under an altar director. I'm not sure if that's a title that's prominent. So yeah, I really love the world building going into the administrative and military sides of Zahard's empire. Okay, so thanks for watching. But before I stop recording, I'd just like to mention why I don't give out ratings for my discussion videos. So for starters, ratings are really inappropriate for bi-weekly discussions, where one chapter usually informs my opinion of the other, losing that sort of independence of assessment. And secondly, I just think ratings only produce arguments, and they don't actually contribute anything meaningful to the actual chapter discussion. I don't want to put out a long video covering different elements of the chapter content, only to get people lambasting me in the comments for the scoring alone. So yeah, that's why I won't be including a rating system of any sort. I'll give my general thoughts and you'll be able to surmise what I might actually think about the chapter from that, but I won't be giving a formal rating system. So yeah, I'll be back at it again. See you next time.